Welcome, everybody. Week 7 of Digital Marketing Wednesday. We're pumped to be here with you today. Ben has two fantastic topics that we're going to cover today and get in the weeds a little bit on both. These are super timely topics. We're getting a lot of questions from you guys on this. So go ahead and put in your notes. Number one, content curation, the importance of it and the efficiency of it. Ben's going to get into that. Then we're going to talk about lead follow-up as point number 2. So content curation, lead follow-up. We'll also tackle any questions that you have along the way. So give us a wave in the comments or post your questions, and I'll be sort of curating those as we go through the day. So thanks for being here, everybody. Ben, take it away, buddy. What's up?
What's going on, guys? So content curation is where we're going to start. And I'm going to pull Bill here in a little bit to talk a little bit because he's been doing this for the newsletter. So he'll have some insights into kind of his organizational model for doing this. But to start off, let's start off with my first book I ever write is going to be something like Ben's Rules for Life or something along those lines. So let's say that these are the 3 rules for content curation that you're going to want to jot down in your notes, and then I'm going to give you the model of what I do on a weekly basis to actually create the curation that we send out, whether it's through our blogs, our newsletters, our social media, wherever we post it at. I'm going to give you kind of the breakdown of how I do it, as well as the time around all of it. So first, I'll start with the 3 C's, right? So the first C is curate valuable content. Curate valuable content. You guys have heard me talk about on previous episodes or previous sessions that we've done about, creating content that you yourself would like to read. Don't create content that nobody wants to read. Don't create something that if the test is, would you read it yourself? And the answer is no, then you shouldn't curate it. You shouldn't put it out there for people to read if it's not valuable. So always ask yourself, what's the intent behind the content that I'm going to put out there? So if you find an article you like, what's the intent of that article that you're going to put out there? The next key thing is credit the sources. There's a reason when you were in school at some point in your life that if you took somebody's work and you plagiarized it, you got in trouble, right? Credit your sources. Let people know where you're getting your data from. Let them know where you're getting your information from. Share that with them so they can do further investigation if they want to. And then the final C is context. Create context, right? This is your job. You need to put context around every single one of these articles or pieces of information that you put out there. Your voice needs to be wrapped around the content itself. So since yesterday's Cinco de Mayo, we'll talk tacos for a second and think of the content that you're curating as the meat, the jalapenos, tomatoes, peppers, whatever you're putting inside of your taco. The shell that is packaging all the contents together, that's your voice. That's you. That's you saying something. And I know a lot of people get hung up on, I don't really have anything interesting to say. If it's coming from you, it's original and it's authentic and it's interesting to somebody who's in your world or in your sphere. And who knows, you might have put a spin on it that nobody else has heard or thought about. So those are the 3 rules, right? When we're talking about curation of content, is curate valuable content. You need to credit the people who have created the content that you're curating, and then also put context around everything that you do. So your voice needs to go around that content. So I'm going to call Bill back here in a second because I have a question for him around one of his favorite things, which is baking. So Bill, a lot of people ask me about time and how they should set their time up around curation of content. So Bill, let's say you go to your doctor and they say, Bill, you are bacon deficient right now. I need you to eat at least 1 piece of bacon every single day for the next 5 days, every day, at least 1 piece of bacon. Would you go to the store and buy a single piece of bacon, take it back home, cook it and eat it? Or would you buy a big pack of bacon at one time?
I would definitely a big pack of bacon at one time. In fact, I would probably buy all that's there, put it in the chest freezer in the garage, and then use it accordingly.
Your love of bacon is legendary. I know that's one of the most interesting things I've ever learned about you was like there's a type of bacon and a way to cook it and all this good stuff. So that's how we should bundle our time in terms of creation or curation of content, right? You need to batch this work together. Stop breaking it out that every single day I'm going to work for 30 minutes on social media or whatnot. You need to batch it into increments, into time increments, just like if we were on a bacon deficient diet, we would get all the bacon at the beginning of the week, cook it, and then eat it every single day according to the plan. Same thing when you're curating content. So there's 3 key phases to making content or curation of content. There's the selection phase. This is phase 1, right? This is where we're selecting content that we're going to do. I'm going to give you 5 categories for you to break down inside of that content for yourself so that you have categories on every single day of the week for you to be able to curate the content out. The second phase is organize your content. You need to organize it in a specific manner. I'm going to help you figure out how to do that. It's simple as using a spreadsheet. It is not anything you need to stress over. So we'll go through organization really quickly. And the last piece is present. How are you going to present your content? So we'll talk about how much should you be writing, how much time do you need to be spending on it, where can you template things. We'll talk about all that in a second. So first, start with the selection phase. Actually, let's back up for 1 second. The first thing you need to do, I would say step 0, is you need to create your ideal client. You probably remember I was talking about this in weeks before, creating the persona that you're talking to. Who do you want to read your content? Who do you want your content to appeal to? There's a danger in real estate where you try to sell a house to everybody, right? And we said it before that when you generalize to that amount, you don't really capture anyone's attention. And then you read content that's really boring. I know everybody here gets newsletters or they get things sent to them and you read it and you go, I've seen the same thing from 7 other people, or it's so watered down. There's no meat to it, nothing good for you to consume. So that's generalized content where they're trying to reach a mass market. And that's where you see a lot of these listing aggregators or bigger companies. That's where they can't win on that local level. That's the edge that you have. So you have got to take time to create your ideal client and write your content or curate content that specific group will be interested in. So step 0, before we get to step 1, would be ideal client. Do you have one? Who is that person? Get really detailed around who that person is. So when we're selecting criteria or we're selecting content that we want to curate, there are 5 categories that I would work from and pull articles for on a weekly basis. So the first category is events. It's events. And the way we look at events is, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, there will be events where people gather in the city around town, whether it's music festivals, whether it's, movie nights at the museum openings, whatever it may be. There's events going on in your area. The best place to go to hunt down the events for your area are city websites, or visit yourcity.com. Visit Raleigh, for example, is a big one where they post all the events that are coming up in the city. And then you can also look at city data, government websites, things of that nature that will curate out that content for you. Those are good sources of information. The second category is home improvement. It can be do-it-yourself home improvement. If that's your niche and you know a lot around it, take some time, curate content around that and put some meat around it. If it's not your niche, go find other people who that is their niche and take their content and curate that out around home improvement relevant to your specific thing of real estate, while at the same time providing them some valuable context. Third key area, this one's pretty simple, listings. You're going to curate top listings every week. They don't even have to be yours for you to put, remember, curation of content, so putting some information around why you think those are the best information, best listings on the market. You go to MLS for that, or you can use other websites, of course. I would use MLS. And go back to the home improvement for 1 second. Pinterest is actually a really good source for this. I'm not a big Pinterest person, and I know some people are big Pinterest people. If you want home improvement tips or links to good blogs, Pinterest is a good place to start. It is a rabbit hole, though, so be careful you don't get stuck down into it too far. All right, 4th place. After listings, we're going to go to trending topics in your city or your target area. And remember, if we go back to our ideal person, you're going to have trending topics that are relevant to that person, relevant to that ideal client, things that they may be interested in. Best place to go find trending topics is Twitter. And you can use hashtags. I like Twitter because you can search really hyper specific. So you can get all the way down to cities, neighborhoods, certain locations in your area, find what's trending in that area. Typically, I'll do city level. I think that's a good area to start with. And there's a lot of publications out there as well that will give you trending information or trending stories in your cities. Reddit's also another good place to find trending niche specific things. So say gardening is your thing, you can find trending topics on there as well. And the last category are photos of the week. Photos of the week. This is a really fun article to publish because you're just pulling out pretty photos. I would keep half and half, right? So 50% you dedicate to real estate specific things like listings, beautiful new listing. Maybe there's a feature on a listing you really like. Dedicate about half to those types of photos. And then the other half, I would dedicate to local things in your community. So whether it's a photographer of a certain part of your city, local business, maybe an event, something going on, I would dedicate the other half to that group. Best place to pull those photos from, Instagram. You can search by hashtag. So hashtag Raleigh, you would be able to zoom in on everything going on that people have hashtagged to the city, pull out the best looking photos. And remember, one of the 3 C's, credit the person who did the photo. It's huge. Not only will it give you good exposure, or it's the right thing to do of crediting people, it can also link them up sometimes. We've had instances where we've credited people, they've come back and commented, taken some of our content, put it on their page, and next thing we know, we have cross-posting going on between businesses, which again drives that organic growth, some recognition for you as well. So the selection phase should take you between 1 to 2 hours. 1 to 2 hours. 2 hours is pushing it. It takes longer in the beginning, I would say, because you have to put together all of your curated sources. So one of the things that we're going to give you guys, we have a document prepared, is a list of all the I think I have like 30 sources I put together so far on a national level. Of course, you'll have to go find your local level curated sources, but we have a national one we put together that we use for our team. I'm going to give you guys a document with links to all the main sites that we use, from mortgages, mortgage sites, real estate sites, home improvement sites, and you guys will have access to that. So that's one thing we're going to put out there, but 1 to 2 hours, could be longer in the beginning during the selection phase. After the selection phase, now we're going to go to organization. This should take 30 minutes or less. Really 15 minutes is where I'm landing at this point after you get through doing it a couple of times. And this is a simple spreadsheet, right? All we're doing is basically planning our days out at this point. So on a spreadsheet at the top, you're going to put date, title, links. Date, title, links. The date is going to be the day that you're posting it. So whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever that date is, that's the date you're posting it. The title is the title of the articles. So if you have one post you're going to do, and there's 3 articles you found that relate to this one post you're going to do, they would go on that date. And then links, of course, to all the relevant places that you got your data from, so that you can link back to them at some point. So that's really organization. That's all that's about. It's not about writing the articles at this point or do anything along those lines or curating content. It's just basically saying, what days am I posting the content? Where's the content coming from? Last section is present. So presentation of the material. Now we're going to get into writing the actual articles. How does this all, how do you set all this up? So day by day, right? Typical time spent curating the content around each article, 5 to 10 minutes. That's it, 5 to 10 minutes. We're not going for a Pulitzer here. We're just trying to get information out to our people. Remember, authentic voice is important. And I know that sometimes you can get overwhelmed. This is where people tend to stop and say, oh, it has to sound a certain way. It has to sound like it's coming from you, right? Authenticity. This has to sound like it's coming from you as a person who's curating the content. I would say 1 to 2 paragraphs. Don't go beyond that. And I mean short paragraphs. Again, we're not writing a book here. Enough to give them context around what you saw in it, maybe why it's important. And that's a really, really simple thing to do. And then from there, consider templating and replicating content that you may use frequently. So the one that we really, really replicate pretty consistently would be the photos of the week. It's pretty simple to do. It's just here are the top photos of the week, blah, blah, blah. And then from there, you're just describing what you saw, why it's cool, linking it back to the original person. Writing it, again, takes 5 to 10 minutes. Setting it all up, you can post all this stuff and then schedule it all to go out. So in terms of curation of content, that's kind of the how behind the way we do it, and then also kind of the rules behind it as well. So when you're doing it, things to watch out for. It just makes sure that when you're putting this all together, that that you're following the main rules, and then just go through the process of it. The first couple times you do it, you're going to feel like it takes a little bit of time. After about a month, and this is where the ideal client comes into play, you're going to be honing in on that ideal audience. So you want to make sure that you are clear on who your ideal audience is, because they'll start interacting with your stuff. Reply to them when they interact with it, and then make sure that you're just very clear on who that person is. We'll emphasize that probably 15 or 20 more times, I'm sure. And then the last thing to do on this is thinking about the breaking down of it. So in your notes, jot down the word again, pillar content, PILLAR content, right? So this bleeds into a lot of the marketing that you can do. Content curation is a fantastic way for you to consistently send out valuable information to people. This one piece will break out from, once you write, you put this on your, I'll take you through a simple way that we do it. You put it on your main blog site, whatever that blog site is. You post an article there that you've curated, right? And then from there, you can take it and put it into your weekly newsletter. Those 5 articles, they go into your weekly newsletter. Now, say you have a monthly newsletter. Okay, well, we're going to take, there should be 20 to 25 articles that you've curated. Put that into your monthly newsletter. You take like the top 10 of them. That's your content for your newsletter now. You're not redoing any work. You're just editing which ones you want to go where. And then you can take each piece of it and post it on each social media platform, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You tweak some of the verbiage where LinkedIn's more professional, Facebook's a little bit more grown up, Instagram's more about the pretty pictures and making sure that you're giving them good advice on there. It's really not anything major on that end. So the pillar content methodology here is huge, because you start on this baseline and then you can build out a lot of content very quickly when you're using the curation method. So yeah, that's the 2 big areas on curation. Bill, do we have any questions or any thoughts on curation? I know you've been doing this for a while too, so why don't you share how it's been going in terms of writing the newsletter and curating our content that way?
Yeah, happy to do that. Before I do that, if you don't mind, for those who might have come into this just a couple of minutes late, great explanation, by the way, of how to do that and the resources that we can point them to. Why would they want to curate content and do this to begin with? So sell me on the importance of this, then I'll talk about some of the things that we do internally.
Yeah, great question. So the reason we want to curate content is that you're putting out consistent content in front of your target audience. Again, I always tell people to imagine that you're in a crowded conference room. There's a high level of noise just from general conversation going on. Eventually that noise will drop. And I don't know if this has happened to you guys. It's happened to me, where the noise dropped and I'm yelling, and everybody I felt like could hear me. Right. So that's one of the reasons why consistently putting content out there, we're waiting for the noise of life to come down enough that when they decide to peek their heads up and say, hey, I want a real estate agent, I'm looking to buy or sell a house, you've been sending them consistently valuable content. So you are top of mind when it's time in their world to make a move. The other side of this too is that you're not putting the pressure of creation on yourself, right? I think a lot of people get so seized up when they go out to create content, and they think, oh, it has to be professional, it has to be in this voice, and I have to do X, Y, Z to make it beautiful and perfect, that they get all seized up, or they say that, or you hear this, I'm not creative, right? So this takes all of that away. It's not about being creative. It's about just curating good content and just saying your opinion on it. What made it cool to you? And that's your authentic voice. So, and then it's a time saver as well.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I think what's interesting is how much this already connects to the things that we're doing naturally day to day. So Debbie and I co-write the newsletter, even though I end up kind of producing it. A lot of the content also comes from her. So I'll share with you some things that work well for me, and I'll be brief on this because, I think everybody ultimately finds their own rhythm on this. I'm still kind of old school in my content. So you'll see, like in this past week's newsletter, we pulled from a book that's one of our favorites, The 12-Week Year. And then it's, marked up with notes that we wanted to share. Every day I skim read the Wall Street Journal, and I'll just lay it out on that table behind me with a marker. And I'll just flip through all the pages, and I'll just circle stuff that I think is relevant to. So you talked about kind of the ideal client, or the avatar is a phrase that you mentioned previously. So I'm looking at content through a couple of lenses. I'm looking at content through what can I learn from this that I can apply to my own businesses internally. Is there some investing strategy? Is there some predictive nature of what the article is? Is there something fun that I can just apply in my personal life? And then the other lens is I'm reading and I'm digesting this information through what can I take to my ideal audience? And our ideal audience are the people who are watching this. They're top real estate agents, they're top real estate agent teams, and they're top brokerage firms. So my methodology is just lay it out and start circling things. So I do the Wall Street Journal every day. I do the same thing with Barron's when it comes out on Monday. And I usually, in the newspaper, I find that the stuff that's most helpful, and whether you read it online or in print, it's totally up to you, is it's the stuff that's like in the middle of the paper or in the back of the paper that's a lot more fascinating. Everybody's already seen the headlines. I get the Journal in the morning. I already know everything that's in the front section because I saw it all on my phone last night. So it's not that that's new. There's a really cool section in the back of the Weekend Journal called Off Duty. And there's a lot of fun, obscure stuff in here. Like this one was all about, this past weekend was all about kids in quarantine and like how to have fun with your kids. And there's a cool real estate section in there as well. Morning Brew, which I shared an article from this morning in our internal group, I think is a great thing to read. I just skim that every morning. And then lots of podcasts and lots of books. And so one of the tricks that I do on the digital stuff, and then I'll hand it back to you, Ben, all the paper stuff, I'll mark it up and I'll leave it in a stack on this coffee table over here, which I won't show you because it's a mountain of research. And then I'll pull from that with the printed stuff. And then the digital stuff, I've set up an alternate email address. And when I see it, I just email it into that inbox. And I'm not saying that's a perfect system. It's just a way of when I come across it, I just put it there. So I have an email inbox is nothing except just content I came across that I thought was interesting. So that's sort of my mad scientist way of doing it. That's either helpful or confusing. I'm not sure which. Good luck.
I like it.
Yeah. Okay, so content curation, that's why we're going to do it. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, before we close the loop on curation, frequency of this. And you started touching on sort of mapping out the calendar. Let's say I'm just getting started with curation. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, I get it. People want to hear from me more often. Here's a recipe for starting to do that. How frequently should the person watching this video start sending out this type of content or posting this type of content?
Good question. I think you can get away with once a day. So 5 days a week, I would say 5 business days a week. So 25 times a month minimum. And again, if you invest 15 hours a month into this and it produces not only a weekly or daily post on your social media accounts, but also a weekly newsletter and a monthly newsletter in that 15-hour time frame, because once you create the curation piece of it, it carries over. The time spent in this is minimal, and you're active on all of your social media, you're active on your blog, you're active on your newsletter. It kills a lot of birds with one stone. So I would say aim for one article using those 5 categories, kind of one per day. Build that weekly calendar out for yourself, whether it's a Monday or a Thursday, whatever day works best for you, doesn't matter. You can do week to week and build it out that way. And just invest the 3 hours-ish a week, and you'll get faster as time goes on. Sure. And then it builds everything else for you, which is why I like it so much. It builds everything else for you.
Right. So I'm with you on that. Let me throw this objection out and then shoot holes in it, because there's probably people watching this right now saying, Ben, once a day feels like too much. I don't think people want to see my stuff once a week. That's just oversaturating the audience. Convince me otherwise.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example on this. I have, I think 2,500, 3,000 Facebook friends. The likelihood of me seeing everybody's post once per day is near impossible, right? Even if I was on Facebook for 24 hours a day, I'd have to get a new post practically every couple of seconds to be able to keep up with everybody that they all post at one time per day. So part of what Facebook's going to do is help them break through that feed, just using Facebook, but this is all the social media sites in general. Their algorithms are set up this way that most of the time, if you really, really pay attention to your feed, and I encourage you to do this one day if you're on Facebook, just pay attention to who you see in that time frame you're on. It's maybe 15 to 20 people that you're going to see consistently. It could be more if you're on for longer periods. It could be less if you're on for shorter periods. What you're trying to do, though, again, is break through the din of noise. They have so much information in front of them. Like Bill is saying, by the time the Wall Street Journal comes out, you've already read the articles the night before, right? The headline articles. So you're trying to break through that barrier to them. So really, we can't exactly know when, one, they're going to be on their phone, two, what that social media platform is going to serve to them. So for us, the only way we can up our chances is by being consistent on the platform, and putting content out there on a consistent basis. That's really the only methodology that you have. There are better, of course, there's little nuances, better posting times than other times. You can test this all out to see which one works best for you, but really it's the consistency. And I guarantee you, I'll be willing to bet money that most people won't see most of your posts unless they consistently interact with the post itself. Then of course, the social media platform is going to say, oh, you've liked this content, let me give you more of it. Most likely they're not going to see it. If you post 5 times a week, they might see 1 or 2 posts a week.
Sure. Yeah, and I think you're dispelling another really good limiting belief there is sometimes when folks will get started in a game like this of consistently posting, they get a little bit disheartened because they see minimal interaction on their posts. And I think, and tell me if you see this differently, I think it's really important that we're just focused on doing the activity and build that snowball over time with quality content for the reasons that you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, the long-term play here overall is not only building out consistent content to produce, activities within your sphere. You have to think about the future prospect down the road that's going to research you. One thing we're seeing more and more, especially with the millennial group now, is they don't just depend on client reviews. They go back and look at how active are you on your social media. They look at what content are you putting out there? How frequently are you putting content out there? They judge your level of ability based on how active you are on your digital platforms, because that's the way they operate, right? So you can't think about this in the short term, think long-term play here. People are going to research you and see, they see a thriving business that's posting content consistently that's valuable to them. It's going to draw them into your sphere, and eventually they're going to want to work with you. So long-term play here as well.
Yeah. Well, you shared a great example of that just a couple of weeks ago in our private group for clients and team members, where someone had sent you a message on Instagram, and they had played around and seen some of the content you had done. So they'd done exactly that. They had sort of anonymously started stalking a backlog of content that you had done, had said they had engaged with some of that content, and then after that raised their hand. So it's really interesting to see a lot more of that going on these days.
Exactly. And the long tail effect, and that was a video, by the way. So anybody on here who's not doing videos, again, we're going to hit you in the face with it. Do a video. It was a video we did back in the beginning of March, and she raised her hand towards the end of April and said, I was going through your content, so we could track down exactly where she came from. I was going through your content, saw this video, it had a lot of value in it, went to our YouTube channel, watched another video there that we had all the series, went from there to our website, researched our website, all the blogs and everything. We finally converted her into a client, and she's going to be closing on a house in end of May with us. But that's where that started, was a piece of content from March. And it was a video. So yeah, long tail effect.
Right. And the cool part about that, before we move on to lead conversion, is that there might be people who will watch this video who says that sounds hard, or I don't know if I want to go to the effort to do all of that. And whether that's true or not, I'm not here to debate. I'm here to say, and I know you are as well, that is the behavior of the clients of the future. And there are going to be people like the folks who are watching this video, I'm sure, who are going to go out there and do this type of work and take away market share from the folks who just aren't willing to do this work over time. It's not a wake up tomorrow and be perfect at this. It's a get started and continuously iterate process.
Right. Yeah. And your voice is unique. Like this, just remember that if you don't take anything else away from today, your authentic voice is unique and people want to hear it. So don't ever get caught up in I'm not creative. I guarantee you, if you read an article, you'll have an opinion. If you're human, you have an opinion about it. That's what you need to put out there. Curate that content for people, because people want to hear what you think about stuff. We've had people now send things to us saying, what do you think about this? I'm curious about your thoughts. And that's because you have an opinion. So you are creative. You are, just be authentic.
Right. That's a great point. All right. So let's transition. Let's talk about lead conversion. I know you're really worked up on this right now. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you completely, because there is a massive opportunity right now in lead conversion. I'd like for you to share some thoughts with the folks, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So lead conversion, we're going to go at this from a different angle today. I'm not going to get into all the science behind it. In the digital marketing course that we talk about, there is a lot of science behind lead conversion, how to do it properly. We have the whole follow-up game plan in there. What came about when I was digging through lead conversion recently was really the client experience. So I want to start off with a question for you, and it's a good one to think about in your business. So write this down in your notes. What would you do differently if you charged admission? As a real estate agent, it's an interesting question. What would you do differently if you charged admission, right? And I know there are some places in the country, some agents, some brokerages who charge fees, right? They charge a fee to take a listing, or they charge a fee to go show buyer houses. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying, what would you do differently if you charge admission? Or you could word it differently. What value are you providing right now that people would be willing to pay you money for? What value are you providing right now that people will be willing to pay you money for? The second question to follow up to this could be, if you charge admission, what would you need to do to double that admission? So say, for example, we charge $100 to come into your real estate team or your business, or you're an individual agent, and to work with you just for the honor of stepping through the door. They had to pay you $100. What would you need to do value-wise to double that to $200? It's an interesting thought, right? So lead conversion, this is all going to tie together, I promise. So something else for you to write down in your notes real quick. Companies should charge for the value they add, not the cost that they incur. Companies should charge for the value they add, not the cost that they incur. Too often when we get into conversations around real estate, people get hung up on commissions and all that good stuff. And that's just because they're trying to cover the cost that they incur. Now, I'm pulling all of these models from a book called The Experience Economy, in case you're interested. It's a thick read, it's a long read. It's really interesting though, I would say if you're a nerd like me, it's really interesting. It's by Joseph Pine II and James Gilmore. Joseph Pine II and James Gilmore. And in their book, they're talking about how the economies are moving forward from basically a service commoditization type into more of an experiential economy. And they gave this really interesting pyramid where they talk about the different levels within a business. And this all relates back to lead conversion, because at the end of the day, the question you have to ask is, what are you doing to make that person want to work with you? Right? What are you doing to make that person want to work with you? What value are you providing in that context? So I'll give you the pyramid that they gave. So the bottom level of the pyramid is called customer satisfaction. And what that is where there's an expectation of customers, right? And then after they interact with your business, they have a certain level of, oh, this is the perceived value that I got from that business interaction. It's not an actual value. You could have a different perception on your end, but it's the perceived value versus their expectation. The next level is something that's really interesting that I think that people aren't paying attention to. They called it customer sacrifice. Customer sacrifice. And the key differentiator here is it's what a customer exactly wants, what they exactly want versus what they actually get or what they settle for. So what you exactly want versus what you settle for. There's a big difference there, and it's subtle enough that nobody even pays attention to it. And then the next level above that, they called it customer surprise. And the question they ask here is, what do they remember? What do they remember about you? So what we're working towards, if we're on that pyramid, is we want to increase customer satisfaction, we want to eliminate customer sacrifice, and we want to create surprise. And there's ways to do this in lead conversion that's really interesting right now. And I think that people have a huge missed opportunity there where you could create surprise, or you could do things that are completely different from the rest of the industry. So when you think of surprise, you can jot this in your notes. They say staging the unexpected. Staging the unexpected, which means you're planning the unexpected. And there's a whole book on another book, of course. We're going to reference a lot of books today, guys. Another book called The Power of Moments. It's one of my favorite books because it's all about how we remember things. And Chip and Dan Heath were the authors of it. And they did a lot of studies into why do we remember certain things in a better light versus other things, even if the things that we remember in a better light, there was a whole host of bad things that happened in accordance with that one good thing, or we had one bad thing happen and all these other good things happened, but we only remember the bad thing that happened, right? There's a way and a reason that we remember things. So when we're looking at customer experience, when you're looking at lead conversion, and remember when we talked about lead conversion, we're talking about a pipeline here. We're talking about the first time someone comes into your world all the way to the time that they close, and then the cultivation of that lead over time in your database to produce referrals and repeat business. So when we go out and we look at the entire scope of your real estate business, we're going to hone this back into real estate. Something you can jot down here. What are the neglected experiences in the real estate business? And I'll do this two ways. When I'm looking at neglected experiences, I would start macro, industry wide. Say, looking across the whole real estate industry, where are the opportunities in the business to create not just customer satisfaction, eliminate the sacrifice, but also create surprise? I'm going to say industry wide, what do I see? So this is where you can go out and look at models. Say, who's doing what? What do you like? What do you see? What's different out there, right? And then I'm going to dial that back to my own business. And I encourage you to do the same. Dial it back to your own business now and say, where are the neglected expectations within my business? Where are areas that to us, it's business as usual, whereas to our clients, it could be a very special moment, or it's business as usual because that's what they've experienced before. And we could do something to up the game to make it different. And you can do this in lead conversion. Okay, perhaps we're going to get there in a second. But overall, I want to give you two examples of this. And the book that they gave that were just absolutely phenomenal. The first was Chick-fil-A said, people, store openings are kind of blah. They're kind of boring. We're just kind of open a store. We're a fast food company. That's what we do. So they created this whole experience around their store where the first 100 people got free Chick-fil-A for a year. They had bands come in. They had local celebrities come in. They made it this experiential event, and they did it because the rest of the industry just kind of opened stores up and never created any kind of experience around that. The other one that they gave an example of was a home renovation company, and basically this home renovation company would get people at the back end of them getting ready to do the home renovations, where they would go visit, the clients on their own would go and visit all these stores, whether it's a kitchen store or a bathroom remodeling store, or maybe they went and visited a place for tubs, whatever it is. They would go to all these different places and then come to the person at the end. He may get some of the business, he may not. So what he started doing was he put them all in a limo together, and he would curate the experience. The other side together, he would curate the experience and drive them from each location, explaining to them the best tips, the best materials, the best ways to do things all over town. He would curate that experience for them, and they all would end up using him to do the remodeling. Whereas before, he would spend time driving around with each client. So now he's leveraged his time, but he created an experience for them that surprised them because they didn't expect that. And he eliminated a lot of the customer sacrifice that they were experiencing because he was able to really drill down on questions and understand the clients. So those are two good examples of neglected expectations in a business. I would encourage you to step back for a second and say, where in terms of my business right now do I have neglected expectations? So a question I would encourage you to chew on. We're giving you a lot of questions today to think about, so hang with me. One of the questions I would encourage you to chew on are, how are people guided and engaged during their experience with you? How are people guided and engaged during their experience with you? Lead conversion. This is where it all ties together. So when a person first comes into your world, what's their first experience with you? How are you narrating that story for them? How are you setting them up to progress forward to wherever they want to go, whatever their goals are, right? And this is the key when you're talking about customization in today's world, is that customization now can happen on a mass level. You can scale customization. Now, if you're just starting in this, I would just start with the baseline and try to figure out the very, very basics of, okay, say I get an inbound lead, what happens? What do I do next? Where am I pointing them towards? What do I want them to do ultimately? Ultimately, of course, we want them to buy or sell a house with us or give us a referral, right? That's ultimately the goal in real estate, to run a profitable business. You want them to buy, sell, or give you a referral. So if that's our end goal, then we need to guide them down that path. The tricky part is figuring out which path they want to go down. And again, we have to curate this so that they get to go down the path. So when you're doing your lead conversion, the first thing I would encourage is look at that initial opening sequence, whatever it is. So going back to Chip and Dan Heath's book, The Power of Moments, In the book, they talk about the reason that people remember certain things at a higher level than other times is because they come at transition points. One of the key transition points in your life, I want you to think back for a second. Think back on your life. And if you had to write a highlight reel of your life in 5 minutes or less right now, what are the key things you remember? Most humans, most people in general will remember the first time they did something, the first time they played baseball, the first time they went to eat at a certain restaurant, the first time you went on a date with your spouse, the first time you sold your first home, the first time, right? We remember our first driving experience, our first eating experience, our first whatever it is. First times are locked in our memory. And the reason is because we know through our culture, through just being humans in general, is that we know that experience will never happen again at that level because it's the first time. So thinking about this for lead conversion, the first time, that opening sequence that they come into your world, what does it look like, right? And of course, we want you to convert, so call, text, email. We're not getting away from that. I'm saying, how are you curating that experience? Could you possibly send them information that's linking them to some videos to help further their understanding of you and your story and your business? Are you sending them guides that are relevant to them? This is where segmentation comes into your business. So when you have leads coming in or people coming into your world, are you properly segmenting them? Do you have segmentation set up even? If you don't, start there, start with segmentation in general, but are you segmenting them out so that they're guided down the right path, right? A first-time home buyer is completely different from somebody who is in their 60s or 70s getting ready to downsize and sell a home. Totally different conversations, different pathways in your business. So the initial sequence should be segmented to those personality, behavioral styles, lifestyles, demographics, and psychographics, right? So that's the key thing is to look at on the front end is your sequencing of your guides. So the two ways I like to look at sequencing too: time frame and then motivation. If you can figure out time frame, we can pretty much nail down people these days, right? So we know from NAR statistics, National Association of Realtor statistics, that most people search online for 10 weeks prior to making a move or prior to contacting an agent. And then with an agent, they're looking at homes, typically 8 to 10 homes, depending on your area. If you're showing more than 10 homes, then you need to do the buyer course that Bill and Debbie put together, because they're going to tell you how to do a consultation, and it'll save you a lot of time and frustration and help your clients save a lot of time and frustration. So do that if you don't know how to do a buyer consultation to narrow down if you're showing 50 homes at a time. So you're looking at time frame. So if we know the time frame of the person, right, then we can really dictate the flow of the conversion process at this point. So one of the key things I'm always trying to find out in my opening sequence is, one, what is their time frame? Motivation is important, right? We want to know the motivation because that's going to help you push them forward, help you convert them, speak to their pains, their wants, their needs, all that good stuff. But really, we need to know time frame because time frame will guide us the rest of the way. So finding out time frame and then having sequences set up based on that time frame. We have 14 days, we have 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and then 12 months. So really figuring out the time frames of each person and how that trajectory looks different with each person. The other key thing you want to do in this when you're converting those leads is using that data. Again, we've talked about smart data in the database. Really make sure you're converting those leads at a high level. You need to make sure you're notating all of the important data. So think of Amazon, right? So when Amazon has a client come on, how easy is it for you to buy something on Amazon? They basically went out and they, instead of saying, how did we do overall? Like they could send you a survey saying, how did we do? They say, what do you want? That's a key thing for you to write down, and be a great thing for you to ask your top 10 clients. What do you want? What do you want that I'm not doing? Amazon never overtly asked that. They just studied their data. They just looked at what you were doing on there. So they knew that you wanted multiple credit cards on your site. So if you wanted to purchase something, you didn't have to go dig it out and then upload it. And if you had 3 different cards to use, they knew that instead of you having to hit load into my cart, they had the one-click button for it to go directly to your cart. They curate content based on your interests. So they know, for me, example, that I obviously read a lot of books. So they're like, all the time, Ben gets books, whereas Laura is shopping for, maybe baby stuff. So she gets more baby stuff curated to her. So it's different based on the person. So think about that type of curation within your business. Now, and I'm not saying scale it up to that level. I'm saying, are you asking smart data gathering questions every opportunity you get? And then are you segmenting out the conversion process based on their behavioral and their psychographic and demographic styles? If you're not at this point, that's the next level to get to, right? So overall, I think this thinking through that main question of how are you guiding and engaging people during the process. And I would really start, if I started anywhere, start with your opening sequence. Start with that sequence and say, what's going on in there? How am I guiding them? Am I providing them like a welcome email saying, here's the best resources for home buyers? And then asking them a question around, again, what's your time frame? And the best way to ask the question is, when are you thinking about making a move? So that's the overall piece on, and I know it was different than we typically talk about lead conversion. There's plans out there. We have drip plans that we put out there for people that you can use the 14 days to follow with people. The amount of touches is important. The questions you're asking are important. Ask engaging questions, but overall come from this different angle of how are you guiding and engaging them from that first moment all the way through. All right, Bill, I'm done my sermon.
No, I think it's well said. I mean, the experience thing is a really interesting thing to ponder. Like I think about openings to movies. I think about the first song in a concert. I think about when we were in New York recently, we saw Book of Mormon, and the opening act, or the opening number, if you will. I'm not a theater specialist, however, that really set the tone for the rest of the movie. So you see this in lots of areas where people give a lot of thought to what's that first powerful moment of interaction. So I made some great notes as I was listening to you on that. One of the questions that came in while we have a few minutes left, maybe you could address this, and I'm going to paraphrase Zach's question here. And it was like, how do you fit together blog, newsletter, and social media, sort of hooking that all together in a spider web? Is there a particular sequence that goes in, or you want to just kind of elaborate on your thoughts there, please?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I would start baseline would be my blog, because that's kind of the foundational piece where people are going to ultimately land back at. So always start with the base of the blog. And then from there, it's kind of social media and then newsletter go hand in hand, because the newsletter is going to be the compilation of all these posts, whereas every post you put on your blog is going to go into that social media. So you can just cut down and then link it back to the blog. So remember, you're driving everything back to a certain point for a reason. And we have lead capture built into your blog. You know, have information about you can call or text or whatever your call to action is. But basically, the blog's kind of the baseline, because that's where you're driving all that traffic to. And then with Google, they're going to like all the activity of you driving traffic back, and then if you're doing the SEO side of it, writing in, if you're targeting first-time home buyers with families, for example, that content is going to get recognized by Google, and you'll start ranking higher in search results. And if people do the long tail searches, it all bleeds back to the blog, and then just go up from there. So blog, social media, kind of with the newsletter right next to it. It's just the newsletter is kind of the compilation of everything, whereas the single individual post go on the blog and on your social media.
Yeah, well said. Perfect. So while you're thinking about the parting shot before we wrap up, I'm going to give them a little bonus nugget, because you referenced the buyer skills course that Debbie and I put together, and you were talking about motivation and timeline of a buyer lead. And so I'm going to give everyone who's paying attention right now a little script that comes out of that course, which, by the way, is 6 hours worth of content that we put together that you can get on demand for only $99. I'll drop the link in the comments for you. So typically, you're talking to a buyer about what their timeline is. Buyer prospect says, I'm just looking. Buyer prospect says, I'm 3 to 6 months out. You have no way of knowing if they're lying or not. And in order to determine that very quickly, what we'd like for you to do is dangle something in front of them that might be irresistible. So here's the way you do that. You're going to say, I understand. So they've given you your timeline. We're just looking. You say, well, I understand, Mr. Buyer. Let me ask you this. If the perfect home, emphasis on the word perfect, if the perfect home for you came on the market tomorrow, pause. Is that something you'd be interested in moving forward on or not? So what you're doing there is you're not saying, I have the perfect home. I don't even know what they want yet. I'm dangling the illusion of the perfect home to see if I can elicit an emotional response from them. You have 1 or 2 possible responses to that question. Number one is they're going to say, well, you know, I guess if the perfect home for me came on the market tomorrow, then yeah, maybe I would be interested in moving forward on it. So now all of a sudden, they're not just looking, they're not 3 to 6 months out. They're intrigued by the possibility of the perfect home. So now you can dig in on the perfect home and potentially accelerate their timeline. The other possible response to that, though, is that they're going to say, well, no, even if the perfect home for me came on the market tomorrow, I wouldn't be interested in moving forward on it because. And then they give you their underpinning rationale for why they're just looking. Because we're not getting relocated to Raleigh until the fall for this job relocation, if it even happens, because that's a little uncertain right now. It's not a we're just looking full stop. It's a we're just looking because with full-blown explanation. And that explanation is either going to be a legit one, like the one that I just modeled for you, or it's going to be one that you could overcome. Well, we're just looking because we don't have enough money to save up for a down payment. We're just looking because our lease is up 2 months from now. And for the sake of time, we're not going to get into the handling of objections. I'm just saying, if you're looking for a shortcut to move past the frustration of all of my buyer leads say they're just looking, or all of my buyer leads say they're 3 to 6 months out, you dangle the perfect home in front of them to elicit an emotional response. So that's like 5 minutes of 6 hours worth of content that we wrote for you in that course. If that's not a good enough sales pitch, then you need to get out of the business. I'm kidding. I love you. I promise. All right, Ben, what you got as a parting shot?
I like that. And by the way, that's a great script to use in a text message as well. It gets a lot of responses on it. So that's gold right there you guys just got. The last piece for me, 2 things. First is I'm going to give you guys 4 questions. I know you're like, we didn't get enough questions today. I want to give you more to leave with so that you have something to do later. 4 questions, though, and it really leads back to the whole idea of lead conversion overall. And it's from Keith Cunningham's book, The Road Less Stupid. So some of you have read this, some of you haven't. Fantastic book. And he's talking about growth in this one particular chapter. He asked 4 questions that I've been pondering, I would say, for several months now. I really, really like these questions. So I'm going to give them to you, jot them in your notes, think on them. And he says at the end of it, he had in his little PS postscript piece here, he says, if you spend less than 10 hours on these 4 questions, you're missing the whole point. So this gives you an idea of how much time you should noodle on these things before you come with a definitive answer. All right, question number 1 is, who do I want to buy from me? Who do I want to buy from me? This sounds an awful lot like that dadgum ideal client we've been talking about, but it's a really good question. Who do I want to buy from me? Question number 2, what must happen to cause them to buy? What must happen to cause them to buy? Question number 3, what must happen to keep them coming back? What must happen to keep them coming back? So I think client retention, cultivation of your database, fear, past client referrals. This is a really good question. Last question, question number 4, what could happen to cause them not to buy? What could happen to cause them not to buy? So that's that inversion that we like to do, where we flip it over on its head and say, you know, playing strategic defense here, what would happen that would cause someone not to work with you? So those 4 questions I think are powerful. The other thing that I'm going to leave with today, and I'm going to leave it up to Bill to close this out, is parting shot here. Go implement in your business. Go do something. You've heard us say it week after week. You guys, we got to get on the horse here. People are starting to come back out of their slumber. We're seeing people come back on the market looking at homes. Certain parts of the state or country are opening back up based on different levels. Go do stuff, implement it into your business, take action on things. We put a post in the group the other day asking what people have implemented. There's some good answers in there too, by the way. If you guys are tuning in, make sure you're engaging with those, because there's some really cool content or smart ideas in there. And other than that, Bill, what you got?
That's it, man. Nice work. As always, lots of great stuff in here. I went ahead and posted the titles and authors of the books that you mentioned in the comments, posted a link to the buyer's course in the comments. As always, if you have additional questions you want Ben to tackle, throw them in there. I'll remind you, Thought Leader Friday is back on track this Friday at 12 noon. We had a great private clients-only mastermind last Friday. This Friday, it's back open for you guys. And we're going to be interviewing the incoming president of the North Carolina Association of Realtors, a lady named Maren Brisson-Kuster. Perhaps I pronounced her last name wrong, and we'll learn that on Friday when you tune in. Debbie and I did a prep call with Maren earlier this week, and she's got a lot of fantastic information about what's going on at the macro national level with the Association of Realtors, some legislative stuff, some RPAC stuff, and also some really cool technology opportunities that are in the pipeline coming from NAR. So that'll be a great conversation right here Friday at 12 noon. Thanks everybody for being here. Ben, anything else before we sign off?
That's it for me, boss.
All set. Thanks guys. Take care. We'll see you next time.